Hi, BookTube. It's Gina. I just finished a book that I wanted to talk to you about. I was so excited. I loved it. And I had to turn on my camera and start talking. This is The Paying Guests by Sarah Waters. Have you read it? Are you a fan of Sarah Waters? I am quickly becoming a Sarah Waters super fan. I've read a few of her other books. I've got a few here in my pile, and I love her. So I'm going to keep reading. I'm going to bump the other books of hers that I own to the top of my TBR because this book just reminded me how much I enjoy her writing. So this is a book set in the early 1920s in the London area. It's set in a big house about a mile outside of London. They describe it as sort of being a suburb. They don't describe themselves as being in London. It is a woman and her daughter who live in a large house that they can no longer afford. So they start taking in some paying guests, hence the name of the book. And it is a story of the woman and her daughter and the couple, a husband and a wife, who move in and rent the rooms upstairs. I don't want to talk too much about the plot of this book because I think, as with everything Sarah Waters, the less you know about it going in, the more fun it is. I think her books just really lend themselves well to going in blind and just hanging on for the ride, because they're so much fun. So I don't want to talk too much about the plot, but what I will say is that the women and the people in the story are still reeling from the loss of their men in the war. So we know early on in this story that the sons of this woman have been killed, have been lost in the war. We know that the father has died, not in the war, but we don't know a lot about it. And I love the 1920s time period. So it's a historical fiction, and it's really, really interesting. So I looked up some of the reviews of this book, and it's got glowing reviews and it's got horrible reviews, and I can actually see both sides. So the way that it's broken up is it's broken up into three parts. There's a first part that is rather long. There's a fairly short part 2, and then there's a sort of a longish part 3. And the first part of this book is pure character. There is virtually no plot. However, Sarah Waters, I think, does such an incredible job of getting into the characters' heads and getting into that interior space and letting you just get to know them in such an interesting and deep way that I just tore through this first part. Now, a lot of the reviews say that first part was really boring and that nothing happened, and that's sort of true, but if you like character stories, that first part is so good. Now, the second part is all plot. And I don't want to talk about the plot at all because it's like Breaking Bad. It turns a page and there is plot, and it just starts, it goes, it does not relent. And this whole second section is just plot. And then the third section is, I would say, the fallout from the plot, the fallout from the thing that happens in part 2. And on some levels, it's a little, not melodramatic, that's not the right word, but it's a lot of tension and a lot of anxiety being built up. And Sarah Waters just does such a great job at that tension building, that plot, that that pacing of just moving things through that I read this quickly. I could not put it down. I also love that it's just very well written. She's such a good author. I love her writing style. One thing I noticed as I was reading this is that it was very reminiscent to me, her style, her interiority of the characters of Edith Wharton. I'm also reading The House of Mirth right now, and while the situations are like nothing alike at all, what's really interesting to me is that they both, Edith Wharton and Sarah Waters, both really get into the characters' heads in such a way that just makes you really feel like you're getting to know them with the social conventions of the time without being preachy or over explanatory. They just lay out this character and the social conventions and the norms of the time, and you just get swept up in it without even realizing it. I just find that so interesting and really well done in this book, and in, oh, I got it right here, of course, I'll show you this, The House of Mirth. So this is my comparison. I want to talk to you about the ending, but I can't. What I want to tell you is to just read this book and let me know what you think. The other really interesting thing at the end of this is that there's an author's note, and the first reference that Sarah Waters makes here is a book by Nicola Humble called The Feminine Middlebrow Novel, 1920s to 1950s, Class, Domesticity, and Bohemianism. And that I thought was really interesting that was an inspiration for this book, because I do also think that, you know me, I love the ladies' middlebrow of the mid 20th century. It's one of my favorite, I'm going to call it a genre. So I really enjoyed that Sarah Waters was using that as inspiration, because I do think a lot of this, you can feel that middlebrow novels back in the 20s, in the 30s were considered lesser than. It was a derogatory term. And so I think that we're now starting to realize that the ladies, the female authors of that time period were very literate. They were good writers. They were really tying into culture and society and norms of the day that the men's books, the men authors were not getting into. And so I think that it was so interesting that that Sarah Waters recognized and used that as an inspiration, because this book does have a lot of those middlebrow characteristics, issues of class, issues of relationships, issues of mothers and daughters, issues of marriages and relationships. And so this is not anything like my beloved Rosamund Pilcher or Barbara Pym. I would say it's a little bit of a thriller, maybe. It's Sarah Waters. If you know anything about her, you'll know. She weaves a very tension-filled tale, and this is no different. I absolutely loved it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And if you haven't read it, I'm not sure if this would be the best Sarah Waters to start with. My favorite of hers still is Affinity, which I read, was it last year or the year before, but which was one of my top 10 books of the year. I loved that book. And this one was equally good, but really different because of that really slow, character-driven start. So keep that in mind. If you don't like character-driven novels, or if they bore you a little bit, this one you might find the beginning section, which is 212 pages out of a 560-page book. It is very character-driven. So let me know what you think of it, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.